An unsurpassed, penetrating, and perfect Dharma is rarely met with, even in 100,000 million kalpas. Having it to see and listen to, remember and accept, I vow to taste the truth of the Tathagata's teachings. In Buddhism, when practitioners share their understanding of their teachings and practice, it is offered as dana paramita. And dana is a Pali word, which means generosity or to give freely. And this is done without the expectation of anything in return. And those who share their teachings agree to do so on a dana basis, so you can support their practice by giving what you can. And Liliane, I forgot to send you an email asking you where you want your dana sent. And I apologize for that. So if you would tell me. I think you're muted.
Yeah, no problem. You just Great Tree.
Thank you. So if you want to send dana to Great Tree, you can go to our website and hit the donate button near the upper right. And our speaker today is one of our favorites, Dr. Liliane Myoren Papin. And Liliane is a Franco-American writer and teacher of Chinese medicine, which she describes as an ecological medicine, particularly suited to our times. She practices and teaches acupuncture, herbology, qigong, and dietary therapy. And her books are, I'm going to read the English titles because I can't speak French, The Treasures of Chinese Medicine for Today's World, The Great Book of Daoist Medicine, Immunity Special Edition, and most recently, Dare Sea Vegetables, Therapeutic and Culinary Uses of Sea Vegetables, with the co-author, her husband, Didier. Welcome back, Liliane.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It's nice to be back with you. I feel like a little family gathering on a regular basis. So Sangha gathering, I guess, huh? So I'm going to, my little signature too. I'm going to share a little PowerPoint. So I'm going to share it now. Let me know if you can see it. There we go.
We can see it.
Okay, and I'm going to put the slideshow from the start. Okay. So, love and compassion, fires of the heart. So, of course, when Tejo asks me if I want to share something, I thought, well, fire season, summer, it's a good time to talk about fiery emotions or emotion that we link to the heart, love and compassion. So that's a little amusing on that theme. And of course, it's an invitation to you to reflect on it with me. These are just some thoughts based on the concept of fire in Taoism. So fire energy in Taoism is linked to the heart, and I should say, which is very important, heart and small intestine. That's not a small detail. To the season of summer, to the red color, and the bitter taste, which is, the taste of things that have been burned or like coffee, for example. It's the residence of the Shen, and that's very interesting too, meaning that in Taoism, there's not a dichotomy between reason and the heart, meaning the spirit, the consciousness is seen as a function of the heart. So many of the attributes that in our culture we assign to the brain is actually assigned to the heart in Taoism. So the Shen is the seat of consciousness, thinking, concentration. All of those are part of the heart. Another thing that we're going to look at today, because it's worth a little detour, is one of the pathogens for the heart is described as joy. So we'll come back to that in a moment, but I hope that it's making you curious. All right. So I have thought, or it's a musing of mine, about love and compassion that I noticed, and here too, it's really amusing, meaning it's not at all inscribed in stone, but that in general, in a Judeo-Christian tradition in India, mystics tend to talk more about love. You know, love your neighbor as thyself, the love of God. And in Buddhism or Oriental tradition, we tend to hear more compassion. And we know, for example, that the Dalai Lamas, including our present Dalai Lama, are supposed to be manifestations, or supposed to be, they're said to be manifestations of Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva of compassion, who is a patron saint of Tibet. So it's worth wondering or pausing, is what is the difference, or is it really different, or is it just, just language? So the word love, the etymology in Sanskrit, that's interesting, is desire, what is pleasing. So I think it already gives us an inkling of why maybe in Buddhism it is not the term we use as much. And as we all know, for the better and the worse, love is a very complicated word and feeling. I love you. Do you love me? I don't love you anymore. I like him, but I don't love him, or I like her, but I don't really love her. Falling in love, out of love, maternal love. And then we have, I love chocolate, I love football, I love dancing. And then when it's really a big love, we talk about passion. And as you might know too, the etymology of passion is pati, which means suffering. And so we talk about the passion of the Christ, right? The suffering of Jesus on the cross, the passion of Jesus on the cross. So there's that ambiguity, right, about love and the width of its meaning, certainly today. And then, of course, love has opposites and shadows, which our language reflects in I hate you, I don't love you anymore. When we talk about honeymoon time, right, it's a very common expression to say that the beginnings are rosy, but afterwards is different. And so we see that very close to love, at least that's what I sense, it's very close to aversion. It can easily turn into aversion. It also can easily turn into desire, which is actually the root of the word, and therefore attachment. So the poisons are easily linked to what we call love, not what is love, but what we understand as love. And of course, we know that in our law system, we talk about crimes of passion, and usually when it's determined to be a crime of passion, it's usually the punishment is usually less severe, which is a bit strange too, isn't it? And so meaning that jealousy, possessiveness, and destruction in our world, in our understanding of the word, are easily linked to the word love. And so it's a very complicated word. That's the least that we can say. However, mystics, talk about their experience of light, their experience of God as a union of love with God. So it's also a very important word in the Judeo-Christian tradition. Compassion, as we saw, passion means to suffer, and so come is with. So is to suffer with. So the meaning is that it's very close to empathy. And maybe we can actually say that it begins with empathy. We cannot feel love if we are unable to feel the suffering of people, and if we don't feel close to their suffering. So we can say that it's more embracing and has more focus on the other person in general, as opposed to I love, which again, I love chocolate is I want chocolate. I love tea. I want tea. So we don't say I have compassion for chocolate or I have compassion for tea. So it's more often linked to giving. And as an extension of self-knowledge of suffering and dukkha from our own experience to others. So it's a source of love in the form of care. So, I'm thinking of some of the things I heard Thich Nhat Hanh say about Buddhism. And he said, it's not that we don't use, or we don't feel like, he was saying that about God. It's not necessarily that Buddhists don't believe in God, but they don't talk about it, because as soon as you talk about it, it's distorted. And in a way, love is a bit the same. It's easily distorted. There's a bit of a difference, I think, between empathy and compassion. Empathy is a feeling like, for example, I have a sister who has really amazing empathy, meaning that I have seen her when we drive, and if she sees a truck full of cages of animals or pigs or cows or horses, she needs to stop on the side of the road and she throws up. She feels so, she's like, she's there with them. And it's an amazing quality. And at the same time, sometimes it's a handicap, because it doesn't mean necessarily that you can act. And so compassion, in it, there is a feeling that you act on that compassion. So it's a beginning, but it's not the end, meaning it would be easy otherwise. So thinking of my sister, I would say her compassion shows in the way that she created an association for animals. She has worked in refuges for animals many times, and she gives money for animals. And so that's more compassion. But you can say empathy, and strong empathy is usually the first step of compassion. Now, is it, again, in my understanding and in my musing, does it mean that there's no shadow side in compassion? And of course not. Here I'm thinking of Taoism, yin and yang. When there's light, there's shadow. When there's light, there's shade. So the shadow side, you can say compassion is a bit less fiery than love. But the shadow side is that it can be cold, and you might have, I certainly have it seen, have heard it used in a kind of cold, detached way, or even condescending way, like, oh, well, they're going through, she's, I don't know, strange. I don't understand how she acts. And I have compassion for her, meaning, she's the way she is, or he's the way he is, but that's none of my business, right? Or I'm not going to do anything. So in the world of charity, for example, compassion can be used in a very condescending way, as a way to feel superior to others, and can hide indifference. It can be equivalent to feeling sorry for, and uh, not be followed by action. So I think that the main point is that whether we're talking about love or compassion, there should be actions of love. There was a writer whose name actually I forgot, but it struck me. She says we tend to think of love as a state when we say I love you, for example, but really love is a verb. It's an active verb. So same with compassion. If there is no action, we cannot really talk about compassion. And of course, in Buddhism, when we talk about Avalokiteshvara or beings of compassion, it's a compassion that includes the whole world and all beings, and that's huge and beyond what most of us do. So compassion, in it, there is a word with, compassion, suffer with. So meaning that there is also included in compassion, in my understanding, what we find in communication, communion, community. So compassion invites communication, saying, I have compassion for someone because they are this or that, but without trying to understand or talk to them, is not a complete compassion. There's again the desire of communicate, of to enter in community in compassion, to create community. So in those two words, I thought that a good link would be to look at fire energy, because both are energies of the heart. And as we have seen, the heart is fire energy, summer season, which is right now. And one of the things that we see is that fire, or at least that strikes me about fire, but we all know that it needs containment. I'm thinking of that reminds me of the fireplace at Great Tree, right? Where you put a screen in front. Or like when there is a fire ceremony, or in Indian ceremonies, you always have a fire keeper. So it's an energy that needs to be contained and watched, right? Fire needs nourishment, otherwise it dies out. So, and of course, we see that a lot in relationships, the fire that burns itself out, and when there's nothing left but ashes. Now, another characteristic of fire, it spreads quickly. It can be warming or burning. So like anything, it has a positive and negative aspect. It can be life-giving or destructive. So like, for example, our blood has a very specific warm temperature from the fire of the heart. But should it be too cold or too hot, then we die. So it's like the sun in a way. And of course, one of the things that we're worried about right now is that the fire is getting out of hand, is not contained anymore. And we get into temperatures that are too hot for humans to survive. So it can be an energy for cooking. It could be an energy for nuclear bombs. So that's something we can apply to our understanding of love and compassion. It's easily stirred by the slightest wind. And I think that we see that also when people are in love, or, even very, how to say, very um, a relationship that's so close. It's not necessarily a lover's relationship, but even some friendships. When it gets to a certain point, the slightest comment, the slightest disappointment can act as a strong wind because the expectations or the fire is so high. And the fire also extinguishes itself easily if it is not nourished. So I asked you a moment ago to keep in your mind that joy is listed as a cause of disease. So let me explain that a little bit. For each energy, whether it's fire, whether it's earth, whether it's water, there's a certain energy that corresponds to it, a certain temperature. So fire obviously is hot, water is cool or cold. And there's also an emotion that's associated with it, and that's considered in modern Chinese medicine to be a pathogen. So, for example, the pathogen the of the liver is anger, right? The pathogen for kidney is fear. The pathogen for metal energy is sorrow. The pathogen for stomach, pancreas is worry. And the pathogen in that list, then you come to the pathogen for heart, is joy. So, when you see that, you think, oh, it's bad, meaning we know that anger can be destructive. We know that fear can be paralyzing. We know that worry can create stomach ulcers and so on. So joy is in that same list. And my reflection on that, because people usually today in Chinese medicine say, well, joy is just a translation. And really, we should translate it today by hyper excitement or over excitement. And I don't think that's quite correct. I think it's really the character for joy, which is, and that's what it is actually, it's the joy character, which is composed of two parts: she, which means scholar or gentle, man or woman, and ko, meaning mouse. So together, it's the gentleness of celebration or happiness, of sharing good news or expressing delight. So it's used to describe emotions of pleasure, satisfaction, celebration, bliss, joyfulness, happy. It also means to like or to love in she high, which is she and the she of joy, also is in the word to love or to like, okay? Or a joyous event, such a wedding. So my reflection on that is I think the other emotions are not negative emotions either, meaning they're neutral, they're just energy. So if you look at anger, all right, it can be neurotic, certainly, and destructive. But very often, a bit like empathy, that can be the beginning of compassion. Um, Anger can be, I'm thinking of Gandhi, who is a good example of that. In his life, he did start with anger at, the caste system and how he was treated, and racism and discrimination. So, and we do talk about righteous anger, right? So it's not, meaning by itself, anger is just an upward energy. Now, how we ride it, how we transform it is the question, what action or what it becomes. So when it takes hold of us and we lose our consciousness, our awareness, or like the heart concentration, then it becomes neurotic. But it also be an impetus for justice or for righteous action. And so I think it's just that's why joy is in the same category. When we say worry, for example, same thing, worry can be neurotic, but when we have a visitor, we worry about their well-being, we fuss over them, which is a form of love and care. So fear is not a negative emotion, meaning we all know fear and we should, because that's what keeps us, uh, that's where courage comes from. If there's no fear, there's no courage. And we would not know how to stay out of danger if it was not for fear. So here again, fear is a cooling emotion, and that's why it can be paralyzing. But again, those five emotions, if we look at them as energetic forces, like water is a descending energy. Unless we push water upward naturally, it goes downward. And so when tree energy, which is liver, naturally goes upward. So these are just energies. And so in that sense, joy, in the same way, is an energy of the heart that can be positive or negative. And we know that joy can be overstimulating. Some people do die of a heart attack after some good news, right? It's, I know I read some news in papers, little headlines about people who die of a heart attack after winning the lottery, huh? Because it's fire energy, it will easily overflow. That's what we saw before. And it has, therefore, the ability to disrupt our heart rhythm. Joy is often, when it's not, I'll come back to that in a moment, but easily linked to a lack of concentration. We know, for example, children, when they are very excited, when they are very joyful, they have a hard time sleeping, right? So it's the heart energy, right? So, and concentration is a quality of the heart. So there can be lack of concentration. We saw that joy and fire is an energy that can spread easily. And so, for example, here is a picture of, I think I can't remember whether I found it as a 14th of July, but anyway, we have the 14th of July coming up, this weekend. And police is out for the 14th of July because we know that it can turn into a fire, meaning in Paris, it often happens that you have people burn cars, you know, in suburbs where people are use that opportunity to protest. And it can just get out of hand easily. It spreads like fire. It can become destructive very easily. We know that in crowd movements. Another thing that I try to represent with those pictures is that usually we all know also that joy is often used as a pretext or maybe it's a judgmental word. Let's say that very often we celebrate with things that are not so good for us, you know, and too much of it. So whether it's alcohol or our favorite substance. So again, it's a fire. So it needs tending, just like we saw with the fireplace. And there is a difference also between, as we know in Buddhism, between inner joy, which is a self-sustaining, stable joy, a bit like embers, that gives happiness and doesn't depend on outside circumstances. When it depends on outside circumstances, it goes up and down easily. And so it makes the heart tired too. In Taoism, we also say that laughter is the sound of the heart. And of course, there are many laughing Buddhas, right? So it's not that joy is bad, but again, it's where is it coming from? What kind of fire is it? A bit like the temperature of our blood. If it's too hot, it's a fever and it's a disease. And same thing with laughter, actually, as you might have known or seen or experienced. Sometimes when we get very nervous or we have bad news, or we can start laughing. And sometimes when people get mad, I mean, mad in the real sense of the word, they can't stop laughing. So laughter can be a tool of diagnosis. You know, if people laugh without any reason and compulsively, that's a sign of disease. So again, it's a bit like love, joy. These are words that are worth our attention and reflection to see how in our everyday life, and certainly, you know, I do that for myself too, the lack of joy, which can be depression or empathy, and compassion. Is empathy leading to compassion? What about love? Is it a verb? Do we get out of love easily as soon as something is wrong or we're not satisfied? So these are really deep questions and at the heart of our practices, I think. And I told you also before, an interesting aspect is that in Chinese medicine and in Taoism, heart is linked to small intestine, just like lung is linked to large intestine. So I use this card because I think it's representative in a way of what Taoism says, meaning we have two chests. We have the upper one where we have the lung and the heart, and we have the lower one where we have the small intestine and the large intestine that are linked. And interestingly enough, in science today, they concur with that. We know that the immune system is actually largely located in the large intestine, even more so than in the lung. We also know that many of the we talk about an infarctus. Do you say that like that? Infarctus, yeah. Infarctus of the small intestine is a medical word. Now, when the small intestine twists on itself, and which creates blocks the flow of blood and is similar to a heart attack, but in the lower, and you can die if there's no intervention quickly, you can die very quickly of that. So those are two chests, meaning what is beautiful too, we see also that there's no hierarchy. It's like the upper is not more important than the lower, right? And physical and emotional heart are not separated. Like I said at the beginning, the Shen, consciousness, spirit, we say that its residence is the heart. And it's both physical and emotional. So you can say that we are invited to look at what is missing in our heart connections on this earth today when people die and suffer from so much heart disease. Meaning in that tradition, that means emotionally we suffer from heart disease. Physical and emotional heart are not separated, and the small intestine is there. So its function in medicine, we say that its function is separating the pure from the impure. That's the first sorting out of what we have put in our stomach, right? And so that's where the color red of our blood is made, because that's where B12 is absorbed, and that's where iron is absorbed. So what gives the color red is absorbed at the level of the small intestine. And meaning that its emotional aspect is discernment, having clear discernment, being able to separate in our heart function the pure from the impure. We come back to love. And obviously, the way we have so much confusion about love, from loving chocolate to loving whatever, to mean that we are not very able to separate the pure from the impure. What is good for us or not is very murky. And so when there is a murky digestion at the level of the small intestine, the blood is also toxic and not very good quality. So what that means for us, what we can think about, or where our practice can be, in that digestion and foods are part of our process of discernment and the quality of our heart. It's not separated. And I teach that now, and I have for a long time. And when I say that, I'm still amazed by it. And I know I understand it, but not completely, not fully in my practice, in my everyday practice. It's really very deep. So it's a form of awakening, right, at the level of the body and emotions, that is indeed all-encompassing. So tending to the health of the heart is important on a physical level to tend to the emotional aspect of our heart. We know that many murders are committed under the influence of drugs and alcohol. And again, I've said that before, but we are very aware of the influence of alcohol on our spirit, but we're much less aware of the influence of what we eat. And yet it's the same. You just pay attention to kids. You give them sugar, half an hour later, you're going to have some kind of tantrum or some kind of crisis. You see that also in supermarkets, you know, the kid who is eating candies and having a tantrum. So, meaning all the fiery foods also require our attention. Alcohol is an obvious one, meat, coffee, sugar, stimulants of all kinds. They're all fiery food. So we need to pay attention. It's not about this is bad, I never touch it, or it's not that, but what effect does it have on us? How do we tend to our fire? How is our fire, heart fire, affected by what we do? So, of course, in terms of physical health, right now, obviously, cooling foods, plant foods, and in the Zen tradition, in all meditation tradition, it's not by chance that vegetarian food is chosen as the food. It's because it's a cooling food. It's not as fiery. And so if we want to practice better concentration, we need to use food that help concentration. So, and today, again, we have such a hard time separating pure from impure, good intentions. And like I have been to not in the Zen tradition, but I remember going to some meditation with the meditation groups in Arizona where people liked to celebrate when they got together for meditation, which is, again, a good fire. And therefore, they would bring coffee and usually lots of dessert, sugary dessert, which they ate, together first and then would go to meditation. And, from just a purely physical point of view, it doesn't make sense because if you eat sugar, if you eat heavy, you're not going to be concentrated. And so the meditation, it's a bit like trying to tame or have communication with an animal after goading it. It really doesn't make sense in terms of the spirit. So this is a good point of reflection for us all in terms of tending to our fire of the heart. So fire can be a guide as an energy to recognize and observe. Where is it located in us? How does it manifest in our life, either as lack or excess? Do we become excessively joyful in some circumstances, or do we retreat, and what might cause that? Is there fire in us, warmth towards other, or coldness? Usually this has to do with our own imbalance, or at least not being at ease with our own fire. Let's say we talk about a warm personality and a cold personality. When our fire is balanced, it's spontaneous. We're warm with others. It's when our fire is damaged, and it can be, out of tiredness or too much or burnout, all of that. But these are good signs. How is our fire? And what happens when our fire becomes destructive? We often have a deep pattern of blindness. So it can be anger. And usually, when our fire becomes destructive, there's usually the first reaction is to blame the other person, not to feel like it's really us. So there's a blindness. So it's a good good point of contemplation. What makes my fire be out of hand? How do I express love? How do I express compassion? How do I feel toward those emotions? Um, are there a source of conflict? I know for me, for example, compassion is a sort of conflict because I often feel like I don't do enough, and I have not come to a clear conclusion in myself as to what is enough and how enough would manifest. So there's an ambiguity that can reflect on my relationships to others in the way I give to a beggar, for example. I mean, in subtle signs, but those are signs of my own ambivalence and my need to deepen that relationship to that inner fire, to that joy. Often also I lack joy, and I often think that if I feel compassion for the world, like with what's happening in the world, I feel like maybe I'm not entitled to feel joyful. Here again, there's an ambivalence in me, and it's not easy, right? So, but the image of fire, I find that, as always in Taoism, I enjoy the very concrete tools, whether it's food, whether it's understanding organs, the energies like here, fire, um, to guide us through the summer, for example, how to best deal with fire energy in the summer, and how fire can be the guide for those complicated emotions of love and compassion. Because again, love is definitely there in Buddhism too. But I remember, and I'm going to finish with that example, I remember a young student in Japan who came to me when I first arrived there. There was a little, I'm going to actually escape there. Yeah, there was a welcome ceremony, welcome party for me. And this young woman came to me and very, Japanese and halting French and halting English. And she said to me, "Oh, I want you to tell me about Christianity and Catholicism." And I went, oh. They said, well, wanted to be, because she was going to France the following year. And I didn't want to extinguish her fire. I wanted to be able to hear her, but I said, I'm probably not the best person to talk to because I don't practice. Sure, I was born in France, so I was baptized, and I'm Catholic because almost everybody is in France, but doesn't mean anything. I don't go to church. And she said, "Oh, but it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter." She said, "Because you were born there. So you understand the heart of Christianity." And she said, "Christianity is such a beautiful religion. There is so much heart in it, so much love in it." I know you can imagine what was going in my mind, Inquisition and blah, 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 blah. And then she went on to say, she said, young people in Japan, we are very disillusioned because our priests, our Buddhist priests, well, they drink alcohol, they drink sake, they get drunk, they have sexual affairs, and it's a very cold religion. It's very cold. And so she said, for me, I want to become a Christian, and I had a vision of us because I was in Japan as part of my own journey toward Buddhism, and Taoism. And so I saw that we were both looking, she was looking toward the West, and I was looking toward the East. And of course, again, I didn't want to extinguish her fire at all. And I thought, well, I know that she's going to discover, just as we know, with Buddhism, we have discovered too that there are many shadowy aspects too. And what I thought too is that in a way, because we were apart from the cultural influence of those religions, we were better able to see. Like if you look at the heart of Christianity, there was a cartoon I saw not long ago that say, love thy neighbor as thyself, don't kill. What's so complicated about that? Right? And with compassion, it's the same. So, but it stayed with me, and maybe that's part of that exploration that I shared with you about love and compassion. And in the end, of course, they're the same. It's our own understanding and lack of discernment that's part of the problem. So voila, I'm going to stop here. Have a few minutes. I would love to hear from you if you have any thoughts on the topic or.
Yes, hi. Thank you so much, Liliane. The last story you talked about going to Japan and the joyful woman at the welcome party, I was just curious, what was the little nut that you told her about religion in the West?
I didn't say anything about religion in the West. I just say, oh, it's wonderful. You're going to France. I say, what a beautiful adventure you're gonna have. And I said, I'm glad you want to discover, something like that. But I didn't even remotely try to say anything. I didn't even tell her, oh, it's the same, you're gonna. I didn't want to. I thought that's her journey.
Yes. All right. Thank you.
That's what I started from.
Her journey.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Just like it was my journey also, I have my own share of disillusions on the way and having to readapt, reshape, and love and falling out of love. I've had my own. And so I think it's part of the journey, indeed.
Liliane, thank you. You mentioned the pathogens, and I missed the one for sorrow. Can you say
Lung.
lung? Okay.
Right. Because, it's a contracting energy, it's like, so you don't breathe as deep.
Mm.
But then sorrow is not, if we look at it, it's not negative. Sorrow is a human emotion, and it's a beautiful one, but it can become neurotic, meaning while we can't transform it or get out of it. And there are many Buddhist stories, like the story of the mother who lost her baby. And then when we have compassion for other people and realize that everybody goes through the same experiences, then sorrow is not transcended, but transformed or helps us on the journey.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Liliane, when you were talking about love as sort of like the aspects of love that make it suffering and stuff, and how the fire energy kind of plays into that, one of the things that was brought up in my mind was like fire. I feel like the fire energy is kind of unique from the other energies because fire, like it has that sort of addictive quality to it where you have that warmth. And then at the end, like after the fire, there's like a cleansing, you know, like in nature and in ourselves, like after there's a fire, often there's a period of new growth, or there's like, you know, a clearing out and a clarity that kind of comes after fires. And I wonder if you have any thoughts about, you know, how that energy relates to the heart or.
I think you said it very well. I think you just said it very well. There are many aspects, and you're right. And, you know, we all, again, if we have compassion for ourselves, and is that sometimes that's the experience of going through the ring of fire that's going to bring us to another level. So there are many aspects. And what you said is quite true. There's an aspect of purification and new growth. So it can be destructive and at the same time the beginning of a rebirth. So yeah, you're absolutely right.
Thank you.
Good observation.
I was noticing and wondering about when you said like blindness, and then also maybe discernment, and you talked about like maybe anger can cause blindness, and it kind of made me think about that light is created by fire usually.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Like the sun is what creates light, and that's fire. And if there's not enough, then we can't see, but if there's too much, it's like smoke or something like that. And like, I feel like I was just thinking about what the connection to like light and fire is, or any
Mhm. Yeah, again, you're on the, I mean, in terms of Chinese medicine, you are on the right track. That's why the heart is seen as the seat of consciousness, you know, the fire, which is light and enlightenment, right? That's heart fire too. It's our relationship to that fire, you know, where it can be used in a neurotic way or not wanting to see, or making the, you know, you said smoke. We know that a fire that is not nourished correctly will create smoke. Or we all know also, especially with love, but that's not really love, is like when we are attached to wanting something, we choose not to see, even though we do see. You know, I'm thinking of in our world right now, you have so many stories of relationships where there was abuse and where the person says that the signs were there from the beginning, but wanting so much that you choose not to see. And that's the lack of discernment also, you know, the small intestine aspect, the lack of discernment, meaning that fire energy is linked to all the other energies and needs to be balanced with all the other energies. How we feed the fire, whether it's a toxic fire or a good fire, you know. So again, it's endless, but the image of fire can give us a lot in terms of relating to it. So is that answering or rebounding on what you were saying?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, I think we're just about out of time, but thank you so much, Liliane.
Thank you too. Enjoy the light, the summer, the love of the summer.
I'm going to make some announcements really briefly. Hold on just a second. Okay, so one thing that we're going to try to start introducing into our schedule is also talking about the Zen Center of Asheville and Charlotte Zen Center events. So this upcoming Tuesday, Genjo is speaking at the Zen Center of Asheville. So that's Tuesday, July 15th at 7 p.m., I think. And it's going to be Zazen and a Dharma talk. So you can see Genjo there. And then this upcoming Saturday, we're going to have Dawn Seda Wilkerson giving a Dharma talk titled Continuous Practice in a Changing World, which is interesting because there's a lot of change. And then we are still doing our Sunday services. We had our first one last week and we'll have one tomorrow. So if you want to come and help prepare for the mountain seat ceremony, we'll have a period of Zazen, a work period, lunch, and then potentially another work period. So it's really fun. Please email me if you want to come so we can make food for you. My email is info@greattreetemple.org. So yeah, please join us. Okay, let's give back the merit.
May the merit of this practice
May the merit of this practice
benefit all beings
benefit all beings
and bring peace.
and bring peace.
Thank you, Liliane.
Thanks, Liliane. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.